Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Lena and I make college and book related content here on YouTube. And today I'll be sharing with you all my December wrap up. You may have noticed that I have a new little intro graphic thing going on. I hope you like it. I decided to change it up with the new year because it's been about a year since I had the previous one, and I just thought it would be nice to keep it fresh, keep it new, keep exploring and experimenting with different things, different color palettes. So we shall see if I like this one and stick with it. I really did not want to make a YouTube video last week, so I didn't, and then it's been a struggle ever since because the room that I normally film in has been torn apart. Because my mom and sister are redoing it for various reasons, so I cannot film in that room anymore, and thus I am back in this room, which was my OG filming room. Not that any of you care about what those details are, but I'm here to share all of the books that I read in the month of December, the last month of the year, as I rushed to try to finish my Goodreads reading challenge. It became very clear that I wasn't going to, but I just wanted to finish out the year strong. If you don't follow me on Goodreads or Instagram, those will be linked down in the description below. I highly recommend doing that to see and stay up to date with what I'm reading and my thoughts on books. If you're into that sort of thing, and I make fun reels on Instagram as well, so stick around for those or follow those if you want. But without further ado, let's get into the video. The book that I read in the month of December was Anton Chekhov's 5 plays. I had read 4 of the 5 plays in November when I was on studying abroad in France. I read them on my weekend in Avignon, and then I finished the 5th play in the final weeks of the semester as I prepared for finals and had that whole hecticness going on. Anton Chekhov was basically a playwright at the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, and he was really revolutionary with what he was doing with plays, and these are 5 of his most well-known plays. They are in order: Ivanov, The Seagull, Uncle Vanya, 3 Sisters, and The Cherry Orchard. I gave this book, or this collection of plays, 4.5 out of 5 stars. This was my Russian lit read for this semester. I try to get one done at least every single semester, so I was glad I was able to get this one in. I also did a Chekhov monologue when I was in high school and auditioning. So I had always kind of had Chekhov in the back of my mind that I wanted to actually read one of his plays in entirety, and then I finally was able to read 5 entire plays. Also, for someone who doesn't really read plays in their free time or as their pleasure reading quite often, it was such an interesting and fun treat, honestly, for me to be able to read plays and kind of explore this new genre that I don't typically read. My favorite play was Ivanov, which I know is not even like his most well-known play, even though it is in this collection. I was really drawn and fascinated as to how Chekhov created his characters. They were really abominable characters, horrible people, and yet you felt for them, you empathized with them, you rooted for them, which I found absolutely fascinating. And then after that, I really liked The Seagull and The Cherry Orchard, and then Uncle Vanya and 3 Sisters was my least favorite, which is ironic because my monologue was from 3 Sisters. I just didn't really like 3 Sisters as much because I didn't like the way the sisters and the sister-in-law interacted with each other. I didn't like a lot of the characters and the plot, but I still enjoyed it overall. It was still a well-crafted play, it just wasn't my favorite. So if you haven't read Chekhov, I highly recommend. He is the most performed non-English speaker writer on English stages, which I find absolutely fascinating, so you should definitely check out at least one of his plays, and I would recommend probably The Seagull or The Cherry Orchard. The next book that I read in the month of December was actually like a textbook for my French literature class called Les Jonah littéraires. Did this book help me do well on my exam? No, it did not. I don't know what I got on my exam, but this did not help me with my exam. After I read the exam prompt the day of the exam, I was just sitting there like, why did I force myself to read this entire book? The only thing this book did was my professor taught directly from this book. This was exactly what and how she taught, and this was a great source to confirm or clarify things that I wasn't quite sure I understood in class. But for both the midterm and the final, it did nothing to help me. So like, not sure if I would recommend this book when studying French literature, not that any of you are, but yeah, I gave this book 2 or 3 out of 5 stars. Yeah, I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars because it wasn't a badly written book, it just did nothing to help me. The third book that I read in the month of December was Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. This book is set in the kingdom of the 6 duchies. This kingdom is on the brink of civil war with all of the different duchies warring and kind of chomping at the bit to get at each other. And then we learn the news that Fitz, the protagonist of this book, is the illegitimate son of the king-to-be. And when this news breaks the surface, the king-to-be, his father, abdicates the throne and leaves the kingdom, or just goes away from Buckkeep, the central part of the kingdom, where the royal family lives. Fitz, meanwhile, the protagonist, is raised in the stables, and eventually he is under the tutelage to become an assassin because illegitimate sons or daughters are threats to the throne unless they are employed by the throne. So he is trained to become an assassin, but things are quickly becoming complicated as one of his tutors is trying to have him killed, and there are lots of confusions to who is an ally to whom. I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. It was my first Robin Hobb. I picked it up randomly on my birthday as a little birthday present to myself when I was in France, and I became obsessed with this book basically from the first page. I fell in love with this book, the characters, the world, the plot, the fantasy elements. The world was artfully created, the plot was masterfully designed with so many intriguing plot twists that I did not see coming, and even if I thought I had an idea of what was happening, it would happen, and then all of a sudden something else would be happening, and I felt completely blindsided in a good way. Part of this book are the characters, and as someone who loves characters and reads books for characters, this is exactly what I wanted and needed. They were so rich, the dynamics between characters so complicated and nuanced. I absolutely loved it. I'm obsessed with this book, cannot wait to read more Robin Hobb, and also would highly recommend. Honestly, like, one of the best reads of this year, and I am so glad I got to it. The 5th book that I read in the month of December was The Keeper of the Night by Kylie Lee Baker. This was my book of the month for November 2021. And I was pleasantly surprised by this book. This book follows Ren Scarborough, who is a collector of spirits in London. She works under the Reaper, and as people die, she goes and collects their souls and basically forces them to the other side of this life. However, Ren's life is not easy. It is quite complicated, as she is half British Reaper, but also half Japanese Shinigami. I totally butchered that, I'm sorry. And so when things kind of fall apart in Britain as she's struggling to be who she is, and she's constantly harassed and bullied, she flees with her younger half-brother to Japan to try to pursue that part of her identity and heritage and become part of that world instead of the British Reaper world. This book is set during the 19th century, and it is a historical fiction blend with fantasy and Japanese folklore. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars because, like I said, it was a pleasant surprise for me. I found it really fascinating that the protagonist, or the main character, Ren, was a very not great character in the sense of she was well written and things like that, but she was not someone that you loved and were rooting for. She made a lot of awful decisions. She was kind of an awful person a lot of the time. And other characters around her who you would assume would be the main character were not, including her younger half-brother, who I absolutely adored. The reason why I'm only giving it 4 out of 5 stars is because I found the first half of the book to be quite boring and predictable. It was only about the second half that things started to ramp up. I became more invested in who the characters were and what was actually going on. I found the ending to be absolutely spectacular and really fascinating and well crafted. I was also really intrigued by the Japanese folklore woven into this story. I honestly don't know that much about Japanese folklore, but from what I gathered from this book, it's quite dark, at least the death aspects of it, but I found it quite fascinating and very original and different than a lot of the more westernized folklore or literature that I am more often exposed to. So I definitely enjoyed this book and would recommend. It is a debut novel, I believe, and a great start. The next book I read was actually an ebook, and it was called For the Wolf by Hannah Witten. This book is a retelling of Beauty and the Beast, although the cover would lead you to believe that it's a retelling of Red Riding Hood. Basically, the second daughter in this kingdom always must be sacrificed to the Wilderwood, and our protagonist Red is a second daughter, and so Red, when she comes of age, is forced to be sacrificed to the Wilderwood, and her older sister is in line to become queen. However, when Red is sacrificed to the Wilderwood, it quickly becomes obvious that things that she was taught growing up are very much not the case. She meets the wolf in the Wilderwood, another hint that it should be Red Riding Hood, but it's not. She meets the wolf, and she starts to learn about the magic that the Wilderwood has, and also her ties to the wood as well as the wolf. It says that this book is recommended for fans of Uprooted and The Bear and the Nightingale, and I can kind of see that with the whole concept of the woods and the darkness of it. However, I would say it's much more well suited for fans of A Court of Thorns and Roses, because it is basically copy-paste A Court of Thorns and Roses, or vice versa, however you want to think about it. I didn't like this book. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. I found the Validan interludes completely useless and boring and just not well written, and so they kind of jolted me out of the story. I was not really a fan of the way that the retelling was crafted, because I found it a little predictable. I didn't really love a lot of the characters and didn't find them very compelling or interesting at all. I did think that the love story was much more realistic, and I was able to enjoy it more than I did in A Court of Thorns and Roses. I found their relationship to be much more believable and not such a parody. Overall, I didn't really love this book. Won't be finishing the series. It was an book, and I honestly could care less what was happening during it. Every once in a while I was like, oh, that's cool, and then again I was not. And I just found a lot of the language and just not be consistent with the world it was set in, so I didn't love that either. The next book that I read in the month of December was actually a reread. It was Courting Darkness by Robin Lefevre. This is a chunky book. I read this book 2 years ago, and I just gotten the sequel over the summer and didn't have the chance to read it, so I wanted to reread it before I read the sequel. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. It is in the same world as His Fair Assassin series, so it is 14th/15th century France. Well, it's 14th/15th century France and Brittany, as Brittany is becoming annexed to the Kingdom of France. And it is all about Sibella, who is the main character of the second book, as well as Genevieve, who is the other point of view in this book. And they are both adapting to this new role as Anne marries the King of France. I definitely enjoyed it better than the first time I read it. It just was such a comfort read to me. I love this world. I love these characters. Robin Lefevre's is so really, she does a great job with research and making it historically accurate. Because I knew a lot more due to all my research about Anne de Bretagne over this past semester, I knew so much more, and it was such a richer read as a result. I'll just say this is an example of an author deciding to write another series in the same world and actually doing it well. And I am really glad that Robin Lefevre did this, because it's so comforting to me to read books in this world. And I know I'm a little biased because of nostalgia, but I love this book. Speaking of Robin Lefevre's and that series, I read the second book as well in the month of December, and this book has more POVs. It continues with Sibella and Genevieve, and then adds a few more characters less frequently every once in a while. And this book picks up right where the first book left off, and I give this book 5 out of 5 stars. I was obsessed with this book. It made me so happy. It made me laugh. It made me cry a little bit. It just made me just happy, and I have not had a book like that in a long time that just filled me with so much joy, and so it was such a pleasure to read, and I am thanking Robin Lefevre for the millionth time in my life for writing these books. And so I finished this book a few days or a couple days before the year ended, and I could have read another book or another 2 books, but I decided not to because I had read this book and I wanted to finish the year on a high note. And so I finished the year of 2021 with a Robin Lefevre's stellar read. I highly recommend reading this series or checking out the first one if you haven't read that first trilogy already. These are all the books that I read in the month of December. If you have any questions, book recommendations, video recommendations, feel free to leave them down in the comments below. I will be moving into college at the end of this week, going back to St. Lawrence University, so if you have any questions or video recommendations regarding the college life, feel free to leave those in the comments below as well. Thank you so much for watching today's video, and I will see you all next week.